The city breathed evening heat. Cars honked, brakes squealed, and 1,000 footsteps drummed against concrete. In this river of strangers, 17-year-old Daniel Torres pushed his delivery bike through the crowd, 2 warm food bags hanging from the handlebars. His worn sneakers slapped the pavement, his shirt damp with sweat from 6 straight hours of riding. Daniel had learned not to look at the people he passed. The businessmen in pressed suits, the women with designer purses. Looking only reminded him of everything he didn't have. His world was simple: deliver food, collect tips, go home to his mother. But something made him stop. Near the curb, half hidden by a crumpled newspaper, something caught the fading sunlight. A flash of brilliance, like captured stars. Daniel glanced around. The crowd flowed past, no one noticing. He bent down slowly, his heart suddenly loud in his ears. His fingers closed around cold metal and smooth stone. When he lifted it into the light, his breath caught. A diamond ring. Heavy, expensive, real. The kind of ring that cost more than everything his family owned combined. Daniel stood frozen, the ring burning in his palm like a live coal. His mind raced with numbers he'd never dared imagine. This ring could pay 6 months of rent. Could buy his mother's medicine for a year. Could fix the leak in their ceiling that turned their bedroom into a swimming pool every time it rained. He thought of his mother, Rosa, bent over her sewing machine at midnight, squinting in bad light because they couldn't afford new glasses. Thought of the medical bills stacked on their kitchen table, growing taller each month. Thought of his younger sister, Maria, wearing shoes 2 sizes too small because they couldn't afford new ones. The ring felt heavier with each thought. Daniel closed his fist around it and looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere in this city, someone was searching frantically for this ring. Someone was crying, panicking, retracing their steps with desperate hope. Someone's heart is breaking right now, he whispered to himself. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, words she'd repeated his entire life. Hijo, poverty doesn't give us permission to become thieves. Our integrity is the one thing no one can take from us. Daniel slipped the ring into his pocket and made his decision. The search began immediately. Daniel walked back the way he'd come, stopping at every shop, every corner, asking the same question. Excuse me, did anyone lose a ring? A diamond ring. The flower vendor shook her head without looking up. The newspaper seller laughed. Kid, if I found a diamond ring, you think I'd still be here selling papers? The woman at the bus stop clutched her purse tighter and moved away from him, suspicion written across her face. An older man in a security uniform studied Daniel with narrowed eyes. Where'd you really get that ring, boy? I found it. On the sidewalk near the drain. Sure you did. The man's tone was flat, disbelieving. Word of advice, son. People like you, they don't find rings. They steal them. And when you go waving that around, someone's going to call the police. Might want to think about that. The words hit Daniel like cold water. He hadn't done anything wrong, but he suddenly understood how it would look. A poor delivery boy with a rich woman's ring. No one would believe the truth. Fear coiled in his stomach, but he kept walking, kept searching. The sun had nearly set when Daniel heard the music. Soft jazz floating over a high stone wall, mixed with laughter and the clink of glasses. He followed the sound until he stood before an iron gate adorned with scrolling metalwork. Beyond it stretched a mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The lawn glowed green under strategically placed lights. White-clothed tables dotted the garden, where guests in evening were stood holding champagne flutes. Lanterns hung from trees like fallen stars. Everything gleamed with wealth Daniel had only seen through windows. He was about to turn away, assuming this was the wrong place, when he heard voices near the side entrance. 2 women in maid uniforms stood talking in urgent whispers. She's going crazy in there, one said. Screaming at everyone. Says her diamond ring is missing. The one her mother gave her? The one with the... Yes, that one. Mrs. Harrington is tearing the house apart. Says someone stole it. Daniel's hand went to his pocket, feeling the ring's solid weight. His heart began to hammer. This was it. He'd found the owner. He approached the gate, his mouth suddenly dry. 2 security guards materialized before Daniel could reach the bell. Large men with crossed arms and expressions that said he didn't belong here. One stepped directly into his path. No deliveries tonight. Wrong entrance anyway. I'm not delivering food, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. I found something that belongs to someone here. A ring. I heard someone lost. Sure you did. The second guard moved closer, looking Daniel up and down. Taking in the cheap shoes, the stained delivery uniform, the bike helmet still dangling from his hand. Let me guess. You just happened to find an expensive ring, and you just happened to hear that someone here lost one. Convenient. It's the truth. I found it on Maple Street near the... Kid, we've heard every scam. Turn around and leave before we call the real police. Daniel felt frustration rising in his chest. Please, just let me talk to Mrs. Harrington for 1 minute. I'll show her the ring, and if it's not hers, I'll leave. I promise. The guards exchanged glances, something unspoken passing between them. That's when the voice cut through the evening air, sharp and cold as a blade. What's happening at my gate? Mrs. Victoria Harrington moved like royalty descending to inspect a disturbance. Her silver gown caught the garden lights, making her shimmer. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, but her eyes held no warmth. Behind her, party guests began to gather, curious about the commotion. Ma'am, just a delivery boy, the first guard said. Claims he found your ring. Her gaze fixed on Daniel, and he felt pinned like a butterfly to a board. She was maybe 50, beautiful in a way that came from money and maintenance. But her expression carried nothing soft. Only cold assessment. You, she said, not a question. You claim to have my ring. Daniel pulled the ring from his pocket, holding it out in his palm. Yes, ma'am. I found it on Maple Street, near the storm drain. I've been searching for the owner all evening. Mrs. Harrington's eyes widened when she saw the ring. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not relief. Not gratitude. Something that looked almost like fear. Then her expression hardened into fury. You stole this, she said loudly, clearly, so everyone could hear. You stole my ring, and now you're trying to return it to avoid prosecution. Guards, hold him. The garden party stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Every face turned toward the gate, toward the poor boy in the dirty uniform being accused of theft by the neighborhood's most prominent socialite. Phones appeared. At least a dozen guests pulled out devices, angling for the best view, already recording. This was better than entertainment. This was a story they could share, a scandal unfolding in real time. Daniel's face burned. Ma'am, I swear I didn't steal it. I found it on the street. I've been trying to return it to you. How convenient. Her voice dripped with scorn. A poor delivery boy just happens to find a ring worth $50,000. Just happens to know where I live. Just happens to show up at my party. She turned to address the crowd, playing to them now. Do you see? This is what happens when we're too trusting. When we assume the best of people who... Who what? Daniel interrupted, his own anger finally rising. Who are poor? Who work for a living? I came here to do the right thing. The right thing would have been not to steal from me in the first place. She snapped her fingers at the guards. Call the police. No. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncertain. But no one spoke in Daniel's defense. At the edge of the gathering, partially hidden by a rose trellis, stood Mrs. Eleanor Thompson. She was 73, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived on Rosewood Lane for 40 years. She knew everyone, saw everything, and spoke only when she had something important to say. Right now, she was watching very carefully. Mrs. Thompson had known Victoria Harrington for 15 years. Had watched her transform from a nervous young wife into the neighborhood's self-appointed queen. Had observed the changes, the growing desperation behind the perfect facade. And she was watching Victoria's face now, reading what others missed. That wasn't anger in Victoria's eyes. That was panic. Raw, barely controlled panic. Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for the ring. Her voice was too loud, her accusations too theatrical. She was performing fury to hide something deeper. Something that frightened her. Mrs. Thompson pulled out her phone, but she didn't raise it to record the spectacle like the others. Instead, she began filming quietly, capturing close-ups of Victoria's face, her shaking hands, the way she clutched the ring like it might explode. Something was very wrong here. And Eleanor Thompson had learned long ago to trust her instincts. A car door slammed in the driveway. Heavy footsteps approached rapidly. The crowd parted as Mr. James Harrington pushed through, his face creased with concern. He was a tall man, graying at the temples, wearing an expensive suit that looked rumpled, as if he'd rushed here from somewhere far away. "Victoria, what's happening?" "The guards called me, said something about the ring." He stopped when he saw Daniel, saw the guards holding the boy's arms, saw his wife's furious expression. Daniel seized the moment. "Sir, please, I just want to return your wife's ring. I found it on Maple Street. I haven't done anything wrong." James Harrington's face softened immediately. He looked at the ring Daniel held, then at his wife. "Victoria, is this true? The boy found your ring." "Don't be naive, James." Victoria's voice cut like scissors. "He obviously stole it and is now trying to cover his tracks. Look at him. Does he look like someone who finds $50,000 rings? He looks like someone trying to do the right thing." James reached toward Daniel. "Son, may I see it?" But before Daniel could move, Victoria lunged forward and snatched the ring from his palm. Her fingers closed around it so tightly her knuckles went white. "Don't defend him, James. Don't you dare defend this thief." The tension between husband and wife crackled like electricity. James stared at Victoria, confusion and something else, suspicion, perhaps, crossing his features. "Victoria, why are you so upset?" The boy returned the ring. "That should be cause for gratitude, not gratitude. He's a criminal." But her voice pitched too high, broke on the last word. She turned away from the crowd, from her husband, from all the watching eyes. Her hand, the one clutching the ring, disappeared into the folds of her gown. She was hiding it. Deliberately, obviously hiding it. Why hide something that had just been returned? Why not hold it up, show everyone, thank the boy who'd brought it back? A murmur rippled through the guests. They'd seen it too. The strange behavior. The disproportionate reaction. One woman in a red dress whispered to her companion, "That's not how you act when someone returns something valuable." "That's how you act when you're hiding something," her companion finished. Mrs. Thompson moved closer, still recording. She zoomed in on Victoria's face, capturing the moment when the perfect mask began to crack. Sweat beaded on Victoria's upper lip despite the cool evening. Her eyes darted from face to face, no longer commanding, now cornered. Something about that ring terrified her. And everyone was beginning to notice. The police sirens cut through the evening like a knife through silk. 2 patrol officers emerged from the cruiser, their expressions professionally neutral. They'd been called to the wealthy part of town, which meant they'd approach carefully, respectfully. Until they saw Daniel. Then their body language shifted. Hands moved closer to belts. Eyes narrowed. One officer's hand rested on his radio. "This the suspect?" the taller officer asked. "Suspect?" Daniel's voice cracked. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was returning. Save it for the station." The officer moved toward him. Mrs. Harrington stepped forward, her composure partially restored now that authority had arrived. "Officers, thank God you're here. This boy stole my ring and is now claiming he found it. I want to press charges." "Ma'am, we'll need to take your statement. And yours, son." "Let's wait." Mrs. Thompson's voice rang out clear and strong, cutting through the chaos. She stepped fully into the light, phone still raised. "Before you arrest anyone, officers, I suggest you check the security camera by the gate." Every head turned. Mrs. Harrington's face went pale. "The camera recorded everything," Mrs. Thompson continued calmly. "Let's see what really happened before we ruin this young man's life." The security guard looked uncertainly at Mrs. Harrington, who stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. James Harrington made the decision for them. "Show us the footage. Now." The guard pulled out a tablet, fingers swiping across the screen. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised, recording everything. This had stopped being a party and become something else. A reckoning. The security footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed the gate from earlier that evening. Empty. Then Daniel appeared, walking his bike, stopping. He looked around, clearly searching. Pulled something from his pocket, the ring, catching the streetlight. He approached the gate slowly, respectfully. No sneaking. No suspicious behavior. Just a boy trying to do the right thing. The timestamp showed he'd arrived 7 minutes ago. The guards had stopped him immediately. He'd never entered the property. Never had the opportunity to steal anything. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones captured Victoria's face as the truth became undeniable. Daniel was innocent. Had been innocent all along. The officer who'd been ready to arrest Daniel now turned to Mrs. Harrington. "Ma'am, is this your ring?" "Yes, but—" "Did this young man steal it from you?" Silence. Long, damning silence. "Ma'am, I asked you a question. Did he steal your ring?" Victoria Harrington's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Her hands shook uncontrollably. The ring slipped from her fingers, hitting the stone patio with a metallic clink that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. "Turn it off," she whispered. Then louder, almost screaming, "Turn off the cameras! All of you, stop recording!" But no one moved. Every phone stayed raised. Every eye stayed fixed on her. James moved closer to his wife, his voice gentle but firm. "Victoria, what's going on? Why are you acting like this?" "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "You can't, they can't see." "See what?" He reached for her hand, but she pulled away violently. "The ring. It's not just a ring." The confession burst from her like water through a broken dam. She collapsed into a chair someone quickly provided, her perfect posture finally breaking. Tears ran through her makeup, leaving dark trails. Mrs. Thompson moved even closer, phone steady, capturing every word. "What do you mean it's not just a ring?" James asked, his voice carrying a warning. A sense that he already knew the answer would destroy something. Victoria looked up at her husband with desperate eyes. "There's a chip. Inside the ring. A memory chip. It contains—" she choked on the words. "It contains evidence. Of everything." The garden party had transformed into a courtroom. Everyone waited for Victoria to continue, barely breathing. James knelt beside his wife, his face showing the first cracks of understanding. And with understanding came horror. "What evidence, Victoria? Evidence of what?" She laughed, a broken sound without humor. "The gambling debts. The accounts I opened in your name. The money I borrowed from people we know, people here tonight, promising returns from investments that never existed. The jewelry I've been selling piece by piece, replacing with fakes. All of it. Everything I've done for the past 3 years. It's all on that chip." James stood slowly, like a man who'd been struck. "How much?" 400,000. Maybe more. I lost count." The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped, guests shouting questions, accusations. Someone called out, "You said my money was invested in real estate." Another voice, "You told me that necklace was genuine." The officers moved forward, their attitudes completely changed now. This wasn't about a delivery boy. This was about fraud, theft, conspiracy. Victoria buried her face in her hands. "I was going to fix it. I had a plan. But then I lost the ring, and I panicked because if anyone found it, if anyone looked closely enough to discover the chip, your whole life would collapse," Mrs. Thompson finished quietly. "So when this honest boy showed up trying to return it, you attacked him. Accused him of the very crime you've been committing for years." The crowd stepped back from Victoria as if she carried something contagious. Friends she'd hosted at countless parties, neighbors she'd smiled at over morning coffee, people she'd considered her inner circle, all of them recoiled. James stood like a statue, his face carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. 3 years. You've been lying for 3 years. I was trying to protect us." Victoria's voice turned shrill. "I was trying to maintain our position, our reputation. Everything I did for For yourself. James's words fell like a judge's gavel. You did this for yourself. To feed your addiction. To hide your mistakes. He turned to the officers. She's all yours. No. Victoria lunged toward her husband, but the officers were already moving. James, please. I'm your wife. Don't let them. But James had already turned away, shoulders bent like he carried impossible weight. He walked past Daniel without seeing him, past the guests who now viewed him with pity, past the life he'd thought he had. Victoria fell to her knees on the stone patio, the diamond ring, that cursed, beautiful ring, lying beside her like evidence at a crime scene. Her sobs echoed through the garden while phones captured every moment. The woman who'd stood like a queen now knelt like a prisoner, waiting for consequences she could no longer escape. In all the chaos, all the revelation and collapse, Daniel stood forgotten near the gate. The guards had released him the moment the truth emerged, backing away with mumbled apologies he barely heard. He watched the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and something close to sadness. He'd expected gratitude. Had imagined a simple thank you, maybe a small reward. Had never anticipated triggering the complete destruction of someone's life. Mrs. Thompson approached him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Don't feel guilty for her choices, young man. You did exactly what you should have done. But I didn't mean for. You didn't cause this. You just revealed what was already there. She squeezed his shoulder. The truth was going to come out eventually. Better now than after she'd hurt more people. One of the officers walked over. Son, we owe you an apology. We should have listened to your side before assuming. It's okay, Daniel said quietly, though it wasn't. Wouldn't be for a while. Can I go home now? My mother will be worried. Before the officer could answer, a voice spoke from behind them. James Harrington had returned, his face still devastated but somehow determined. Wait. Please wait, young man. I need to say something. The remaining guests, the ones who hadn't fled in embarrassment or anger, turned to watch. James Harrington looked 10 years older than he had an hour before. But his voice was steady when he addressed the crowd. Tonight, we witnessed something that should shame us all. A young man, someone we would have dismissed, someone some of you did dismiss, showed more integrity than anyone else here. He gestured toward Daniel. He found something valuable and spent his evening, his working time, his earning time, trying to return it to a stranger. And how did we respond? Silence greeted his question. Uncomfortable, guilty silence. We accused him, suspected him, would have arrested him. All because of how he looked, where he came from, what he was wearing. James's voice grew stronger. While my wife, dressed in designer gowns and dripping with jewelry, was the real criminal. Tell me, who showed more character tonight? Mrs. Thompson began to clap. Slowly, others joined her. The applause built, spreading through the garden until even the officers were nodding in respect. Daniel felt his face burning, but not with shame this time. With something else. Something that felt like vindication. I don't know your name, James said, approaching him directly. But I'd like to. Daniel Torres, sir. James extended his hand. Daniel shook it, feeling the strength in the older man's grip. Daniel Torres. Tonight, you showed me what real wealth looks like. And it has nothing to do with money. James Harrington was a man accustomed to making quick decisions. Building his investment firm had required the ability to see value where others saw risk, to act while others hesitated. He saw that same quality in Daniel, the ability to make hard choices and live with them. Daniel, I need to know something. Why did you really return that ring? You could have sold it, kept it. No one would have known. Daniel thought about lying, making himself sound more noble than he felt. But something about this moment, this man, demanded honesty. I thought about keeping it, he admitted. For maybe 5 minutes, I thought about everything it could buy. My mother needs medicine. My sister needs shoes. We're 3 months behind on rent. He met James's eyes. But my mother raised me to believe that who we are matters more than what we have. She said our integrity is the only thing poverty can't take from us. So I returned it because keeping it would have made me someone I'm not. Someone she didn't raise. James nodded slowly, something like recognition in his expression. Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman. She's the best person I know. Then she deserves better than the struggles you've described. James pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. What's your mother's name? Rosa Torres. Sir, why? Because I'm about to change your life, Daniel. James Harrington made 3 phone calls while Daniel stood frozen, not quite believing what he was hearing. The first call was to his lawyer. Draft a full scholarship package. Complete coverage, tuition, books, housing, living expenses. 4 years at any college he chooses. Send the paperwork to my office tomorrow. The second call was to the hospital where Rosa Torres was registered. I need to speak to billing. There's a patient, Rosa Torres. I want all her medical debts cleared. Every test, every treatment, every medication she needs, covered completely. Set up an account. Yes, I'll sign the authorization tomorrow. The third call was to his own company. I need to create a position. Executive Assistant Program. Starting salary $60,000. Full benefits. I have the perfect candidate. When he finished, he looked at Daniel, who stood with tears streaming down his face. I can't accept this, Daniel whispered. It's too much. I just returned a ring. That's all I did. You did more than that. You showed integrity when it would have been easier to be dishonest. You maintained your dignity when we tried to strip it from you. And you refused to hate us even when we treated you terribly. James's voice grew thick with emotion. My wife taught me an expensive lesson tonight. Character can't be bought. It can only be recognized and rewarded. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Daniel fell apart. His knees buckled, and Mrs. Thompson caught him, helping him into a chair. He couldn't stop crying, couldn't speak, could only shake his head in disbelief. Medical bills that had loomed like mountains, gone. The education he'd stopped dreaming about, possible. A job that paid more than he'd made in 2 years of deliveries, waiting. One simple decision. One choice to do right instead of easy. And his entire life had changed. Son, Mrs. Thompson said gently, let it out. You've earned these tears. One of the party guests, a woman in a blue dress, stepped forward. I want to contribute too. My husband and I will cover your family's rent for the next year. Another voice. I'll furnish your apartment. New furniture, whatever you need. Another. My company is hiring. I can get your mother a job in our office. Better hours, better pay. The offers kept coming. People who'd watched him be humiliated now competed to help him. Perhaps out of guilt. Perhaps out of genuine recognition. Either way, Daniel's life was transforming before his eyes. James knelt beside Daniel's chair. You gave me back more than a ring tonight. You gave me back my faith in people. That's worth more than I could ever repay. The video went viral before morning. Multiple guests had posted their footage online, and the story spread like wildfire across social media. The hashtags began trending. Hashtag #DeliveryBoyHero, hashtag Integrity Matters, hashtag Judge Not by Appearance. By sunrise, Daniel's face was everywhere. News outlets picked up the story. Television reporters camped outside his apartment building. His phone, which had barely worked the day before, now rang constantly with interview requests. But the response was mixed. Some praised Daniel's integrity. Others praised James Harrington's generosity. But many focused their anger on those who'd assumed the worst based on Daniel's appearance. This is what's wrong with our society, read one viral post with 10 million views. A poor kid tries to do the right thing, and we assume he's a criminal. Meanwhile, wealthy people commit crimes in designer clothes, and we call them troubled. The video of Mrs. Harrington's breakdown, her confession, her collapse, it circulated everywhere. People who'd never heard her name now discussed her constantly. Some felt sympathy. Most felt satisfaction. The wealthy woman who judged a poor boy had been revealed as a fraud. Mrs. Thompson's close-up footage, capturing Victoria's panic before anyone else noticed, became the most watched clip. She knew he was innocent, the top comment read. She knew, and she tried to destroy him anyway. Rosa Torres collapsed when Daniel told her. She'd been awake all night, worried when he didn't come home on time. When he finally walked through the door at midnight, exhausted and overwhelmed, she'd seen his tears and assumed the worst. "Mama, we're okay," he said in Spanish, holding her while she cried. "We're more than okay. Everything's going to be different now." He told her everything. About the ring, the accusation, the truth, the rewards. Rosa listened with her hands pressed to her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. "You could have kept it," she whispered when he finished. "No one would have blamed you. We need so much, Mijo. You raised me better than that." She pulled him close, and they stayed that way for a long time. Two people who'd survived on integrity and hope, now watching those principles bear fruit beyond their wildest dreams. "Your father would be so proud," Rosa finally said. Daniel's father had died when he was 7, working construction to support them. He always said, "Do right and trust God." "You did right, Mijo. You did so right." Maria, Daniel's 14-year-old sister, emerged from their shared bedroom. She'd been listening. Her face was wet with tears. "You're going to college?" she asked. "I'm going to college. We can stay in the apartment?" "We can stay. No more eviction notices." She ran to him, and he caught her, spinning her around like he used to when she was small. 2 weeks later, Daniel started his new job at Harrington Investments. His first day, he wore a suit James had helped him buy. His mother had cried when she saw him dressed for the office. The staff treated him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Everyone knew his story. Everyone had seen the videos. Some judged him, assuming he'd leveraged the situation. But most recognized what he was, a young man given an opportunity he'd earned through character alone. James became a mentor, teaching Daniel about business, investments, professional life. But he also learned from Daniel about resilience, about maintaining integrity under pressure, about the world most wealthy people never saw. "You know what I realized?" James said one afternoon, reviewing contracts with Daniel. "I've been making investment decisions for 20 years, always looking for the best return. But I never invested in people. Not really. Not until you showed me what I'd been missing." He'd started a new foundation, the Integrity Initiative, offering scholarships to young people who demonstrated character over credentials. Daniel helped review applications, recognizing himself in their stories. Mrs. Harrington faced charges. The investigation revealed the full scope of her fraud, over $600,000 stolen or borrowed under false pretenses. James filed for divorce. The mansion was sold to pay debts. The fairy tale had ended, but honestly, this time. The neighborhood on Rosewood Lane became famous. Tour buses occasionally drove past the gate where the incident occurred. The story had become legend, a modern parable told and retold. Mrs. Thompson gave interviews to journalists interested in the deeper story. "I've lived here 40 years, she told one reporter. "I've watched money come and go. Watched people rise and fall. But that night, I watched something rare. I watched a young man show us what we'd forgotten. That character doesn't come from what you own. It comes from who you choose to be when no one's watching." Daniel returned to his old delivery job once. Not to work, but to thank his former boss and say goodbye to his coworkers. They threw him a party, proud that one of their own had made good. He left generous tips for everyone, remembering what those extra dollars had meant. He visited his old neighborhood regularly, never forgetting where he came from. When kids asked for advice, he told them about the ring, about the choice, about how one decision had changed everything. "But you have to be ready," he'd tell them. "You have to build your character every day, in small ways, so when the big moment comes, you know who you are." The community erected a small plaque near where Daniel found the ring. It read, "Integrity found here." 5 years passed. Daniel graduated college with honors, majoring in business and social work. He discovered his passion wasn't just in making money, but in creating opportunities for others. He expanded the Integrity Initiative, opening chapters in 50 cities. Thousands of young people received scholarships. Thousands more received mentorship, job training, second chances. Rosa Torres, healthy and thriving thanks to proper medical care, worked in the foundation's office. She managed scholarship applications, recognizing the desperate hope in each letter, remembering her own prayers answered. Maria followed her brother to college, studying education. She wanted to teach in underprivileged neighborhoods, helping kids like they'd been. James Harrington and Daniel remained close. The older man found in Daniel the son he'd never had, and Daniel found a father figure to replace the one he'd lost. One evening, they stood together at the Foundation's anniversary gala. 500 people filled the hall, all connected by one common thread. They believed character mattered more than circumstance. "Do you ever regret it?" James asked quietly. "That night you returned the ring? Ever wonder what your life would be like if you'd kept it?" Daniel thought about the question seriously. That ring could have brought temporary relief. Could have solved immediate problems. But it would have cost him something irreplaceable. "No regrets," he finally answered. "That ring was a test. And I passed. Everything that came after, I earned it. That matters more than any shortcut." James smiled, raising his glass. "To integrity, the one investment that always pays dividends." They toasted, two men from different worlds brought together by one honest choice on one ordinary evening. Around them, hundreds of lives transformed by that same principle, that who you are matters more than what you have. Daniel Torres had returned a diamond ring and gained something far more valuable, proof that doing right, even when it's hard, even when no one would know, builds the kind of life worth living. The story spread far beyond Rosewood Lane, becoming a modern legend. Parents told it to children. Teachers shared it in classrooms. It reminded people that in a world that often rewarded shortcuts and deception, integrity still mattered. Still changed lives. Still revealed truth. And sometimes, just sometimes, one honest choice could transform everything, and in the end, everyone learned that one small act of kindness can rewrite a whole life, and moments like this remind us that kindness still matters. If this story touched your heart, like and subscribe. Thanks. Your support helps more inspiring stories reach the world. The end.